It begins with a story about the strong smell of blood. The girl is holding a knife and is very tense. The white bed was stained with red stains. It all looked very much like blood. The guy was lying on the bed covered in blood, and the girl standing next to him was holding a knife in her hands and didn't know what to do. However, after thinking for a while, she still gathered her thoughts and made another blow. It was a novel called Blood Revenge. The title of this novel reflects its entire essence. This is a chilling revenge fantasy novel about a brother and sister. The main male character and his younger sister are exactly what this story tells about. They were born into the Count's family, which was a very prestigious magical family in the entire empire. But they were falsely accused of treason and destroyed everything in one morning. At the last moment, the parents used a forbidden invisibility spell on their children, so that they could be saved and finally live in peace. It was thanks to the sacrifice of their parents that they almost managed to heal in the bloodbath. But what was left to do? Little children who knew nothing. Everyone around them condemned and disrespected them and called them dirty beggars. They could not find a good place for themselves because they were chased everywhere from every corner, and they could not find a certain shelter for themselves even while it was snowing. They were really despised and even almost beaten because they were nobody and nobody. However, there was a moment when a woman stood up for them because she felt sorry for the children. They really all cried a lot, and the girl felt very sorry for them and decided to apologize to them and offered them food. She decided to give them a certain box of food, but there were mice inside. She gave them this thing there and told them to eat it and immediately fail from there. They survived as best they could until the day something else happened. Estelle began to understand that she is a character in the novel Bloody Revenge, and a very sad and terrible end awaits them and their brother in the future. They were reborn to live this life again. The brother said they had to go back because they would drop the charges against their family. The brother earned the fame of a hero who came from a common people. He told his sister to take care of his nephew. One day he decided that from now on they could live a happy life. And in the end, the poor brother did not realize anything. The blade of true darkness, his beloved son and younger sister, in the very conclusion, even as Cashin took his own life, the red curtain of sad vengeance descends, stained with the blood of the innocent. The blood feud is over. Estelle began to cry and her brother was very worried about this. He thought she was very hungry, so he handed her a carrot because it was leftover clover. If she cries, everyone will look down on her, and this could not be allowed. She must let everyone know that they were not to be mocked. And it was necessary to show their harsh look and appearance and hold themselves with dignity in order to survive and gain their dignity and a certain authority. They have to be brave and just put up with anything, and the luxurious life they had and which they now dream of will return to them. But the girl could not tell everything she knew to her brother. There was no point in suffering again, and it didn't matter how hard they tried, but in the end they would both die. She tried somehow to hint to her brother that maybe this is the end and their fate has already been decided in advance. As it is now, and all this is simply useless, to do something, strive for something and survive. It doesn't matter what they will do next. But it all made no sense, and the girl started crying and just fell into complete depression and hysteria. But at that moment, her brother was convinced that there was no such thing as destiny or a predetermined end. And if there was such a thing, they simply had to change that destiny themselves. When the girl sat alone, she understood that her brother was right. She knew the plot of that novel, so she could write her own new destiny. Although the Grey Cardinal was not revealed in the novel, there were clearly clues to find him. 1. It is important to know the people who fabricated the false evidence that the Count committed treason. They were 3 spies, 1 human and the other 2 were werewolves. When the girl's family was killed, they ran to this place, and that's what the story said about it. The girl did not know where these spies went and wanted to find it. This place was the Duchy of Anise. It was an unusually cold duchy located in the north of the empire and was the land of werewolves. The chief duke of this duchy was a tamer of beasts and lord of werewolves. A certain secret was also hidden. The girl was alone thinking, will she be able to get to this place? And if she can, or will she find the Grey Cardinal who was not found in the novel? At that moment, the girl heard her brother's voice saying that he knew and was 100% sure that his mom and dad were not to blame, and that he would worry about his little sister and save her so it wouldn't happen to him. The girl listened to this and had tears in her eyes, because she knew her brother like no one else and loved him very much. He worked day and night, and it greatly exhausted him and took away his strength. His hands were covered in calluses, but he held a stick firmly with them and practiced fencing every morning. He behaved in exactly the same way in his past life. He was doing all this for their late parents' sake, and of course for her own sake. She knew she had to do something for both of them as well. Therefore, she decided that she must make her way into the Duchy of Anise at any cost. Also reveal the identity of the Grey Cardinal there to change his and his brother's ending. Many years have passed since the decision to change their fate. Cashin successfully entered the knightly order. She turned her attention to studying veterinary medicine and successfully found work at the best medical center outside the duchy. But for her it was not enough in life. The duchy was very far away, and the girl did not like it at all. She was approached by a man who asked her to prepare the medicine he had told her about. He completely despised her and called her a very worthless and slow girl. It was the director of the treatment center, and he constantly insulted and discriminated against her. The girl had to endure all this and wait, but now was the moment when she understood that the Duke's life was in her hands. At that moment, she saved his life. In the novel, the director of the medical center saved this Duke. After that, he began to consider the director his savior. Therefore, he invited him to the duchy to listen to his favor. But now everything has become exactly the opposite. And now the girl is the Duke's savior. She fed him from a spoon and took great care of him while he was unconscious. He already looked much better, and his facial expression had also improved. All her efforts for the sake of today were not in vain. He may not hear her, but she still wanted to say that his treatment was completed and also wished him a speedy recovery. She also added that he should take her into his duchy. Now she could relax, but suddenly she really wanted to sleep. She fell asleep, and at that moment the Duke woke up and saw a girl in front of him. He was surprised at her appearance. The girl woke up and saw a figure in a dark cloak standing in front of her. She was scared because she didn't know who it was. He introduced himself as the Duke, and also thanked her for saving him. Since she was his savior, he had to repay her, so it had to be discussed at his estate, and he invited her with him. The girl realized that finally this long-awaited moment had come, and now she could get into his estate. It turned out that she was able to hide with the help of invisibility magic. The daughter of a rebellious earl, despite everything, he could not allow the traitor's line to continue and ordered that she should die. The girl definitely did not expect such a turn of events, and she could not just die right now. She realized that it was all a dream and everything was normal. But even in his sleep his eyes were very, very frightening. Ruler of the land and slayer of monsters, a ruler who makes the entire continent outside the empire tremble with fear. One day he unexpectedly appeared in the duchy, and his real name, as well as his animal origin, was a secret. The girl did not know if she could do it. Ever since she became aware of the world in the novel, she had a single goal. It is to leave everything and infiltrate the estate of Anais to reveal the identity of the Grey Cardinal, who was the main enemy of her family. For this reason, she began studying therapy and finally saved the Duke's life. But of course she could have been discovered and killed. She woke up and saw the Duke again in front of her, who called her his savior. She understood that it seemed like her dream was becoming a reality and he could kill her. She trembled, looking at him, and tried to act as if nothing had happened and expressed her joy that he was safe and sound. So suddenly she couldn't breathe, and it all probably happened because she was very excited, or maybe because of that terrible dream. She had to pull herself together and not forget the efforts she had made to now appear before the Duke and be his savior and enter his estate at last. She calmed herself down and tried to concentrate and be herself and not make the Duke doubt anything. The Duke understood that she was his savior, but his look was very strange. He looked at her as if she were an enemy, not a savior, when he said that he had to pay her back. Then the scientists were very afraid at these words. But she saved his life, so she must be strong and start acting. She was doing everything in her power to make him well, and if he paid her back, she would love it. But she still had a certain favor for him, which he had to perform. But this house looked very unreliable, so she suggested that we talk elsewhere. He invited her to come to his estate. Finally, the girl realized that her plan was accomplished, and she did it, and now she can infiltrate the Duke's estate. The guy sat down on his knee and said that he was really waiting for these words, and suddenly he took her hand. It became easier to breathe, and this feeling after everything was very appropriate for her. Suddenly she came back to reality and realized that the Duke had said that he had been waiting for that answer. He understood that the girl knew who he was. However, judging by the fact that the spies hid in his estate, the Duke would most likely be a Grey Cardinal. The girl must pretend that she does not know anything and does not guess about anything. But the boy understood that it seemed that the girl knew everything, and then thought that maybe it all just seemed to him. For some reason, he had such a look as if he was about to cry. However, he quickly changed the subject of the conversation so as not to waste time. He had already prepared a carriage, and it was already waiting for them outside. But then he added that before they left, he wanted to know the name of his rescuer. The girl told him her name, and she was just a commoner who worked at a medical center outside the duchy. Cashin was her favorite brother, and she wondered if he was okay now. Now she is going to the Duke's estate, and there she will definitely change their fate. She hoped that by the end of the road it would not turn out that her new fate was a very painful death. At last they were both riding in a big carriage, and the girl did not know where to start a conversation with him, because she was ready to just die from embarrassment and shame. Not a word was said after they got into the carriage, but she had something to say. She thought about telling him that maybe she was bored or maybe she was very stressed. But she couldn't help herself because she was short of breath and had a headache. The Duke, on the other hand, was very calm and just stared out the window, and she did not understand where he could be so calm. His wound has already healed, but nevertheless, he almost died, and at the same time he is ready to let a stranger into his estate. Most of the people from that state hated and were very wary of the people who had enslaved them in the past. However, Duke Anise was probably not like that. At that moment, the Duke noticed how the girl was looking at him and decided to ask what was happening to her. She explained to him that for a person he was very, very handsome. She was busy treating injuries and therefore did not notice his face at all. However, in reality, the girl said this to calm him down and was not interested in him. Perhaps some are talented in music, but the Duke's talent is his face. And it was the absolute truth, and the girl was not exaggerating at all. She recognized his image of a severely wounded and fallen on the ground as soon as she saw it. That is why the Duke is called the God of the Night. In any case, she couldn't help but admire him because she expressed it very sincerely. The Duke was surprised that he was really so handsome and she liked his face. Suddenly, at the moment of their conversation, the girl somehow began to feel strange, and probably it was some kind of tension and pain. Herzog understood that something strange was indeed happening to her. She had very heavy breathing and chills and a headache and tremors. The Duke took the girl's hand and thought that she was much relieved. And it was true. That's why the girl remembered that they had already held hands like that, and that moment also made her feel much easier. Only the girl did not understand what the Duke had done to her. He gave some candy and it was strawberry flavored. He told the girl to rest for a while until they arrived. And when they find themselves in the duchy, she will learn the incredible truth. A new day came and someone called the girl. It was a small cat or dog and he kept calling her. For some reason she wanted to stroke him and touched him. She thought it would be soft and fluffy, but it turned out to be something very dense and smooth. It turned out that the girl had some hallucinations, and instead of some animal she was stroking the Duke's head. The wards were simply amazed at what was happening around them. When the girl came to her senses, she realized where she was and apologized for her behavior to the Duke. She became very ashamed and blushed. This woman had just stroked the Duke's hair, and no one could believe that she could afford it. These rumors immediately spread throughout the duchy, and they were greatly frightened and bewildered by this event. However, the acuity of hearing varied according to race, and so the story often becomes very false. This is an outsider, and for such impudence this person should be beheaded altogether. However, the Duke did not see anything so terrible in this at all and did not consider it necessary to say any apologies. The girl thought that he felt somehow offended, but it was not so. A simple person carelessly touched the Duke, and this was really unacceptable in the opinion of a commoner. However, the Duke's reaction puzzled her. Herzog instead advised the girl to see his doctor about her health, and she thanked him for it. When the servants saw this girl in the estate, no one understood what kind of person she was and why she was here among them at all. In the next chapter, the ward saw the Duke and bowed before him. He asked about his doctor, who was in his office, and said that he needed to meet to check the health of the guest. Instead, everyone still discussed the situation when the girl touched the Duke's hair and even said that she looked like a hamster. The girl felt all these dirty conversations about her behind her back and felt all the eyes on her, because she really made such an absurd mistake. Although she made a mistake, it doesn't matter what others say, because now she is the one who saved the Duke's life and is already used to high-mindedness. Because no matter what she heard, she was not surprised at all. When they entered the doctor's office, he was glad to see them, because he had not heard of a stranger entering their estate for many years. Before that, she was the Duke's life companion. Of course, the Duke was not sure that it should be rushed, although in their time falling in love at first sight is considered normal. The girl did not understand at all what was happening around her and why she was called the Duke's companion in life. Between them two was the seal of life companions. She remembered reading about it in a book. It was a long time ago in an ancient magic, a ritual in which people swore to love each other forever. It was not limited to sharing pain with each other. When one of them dies, the spell causes the other to die as well. But how can a beginning exist between a man and his Duke origin? In addition, the girl did not understand. And here she was, how it was even possible, and it was impossible to believe. They were bound by a seal, but she did not take part in any ritual, and the Duke admitted that he himself was also surprised. Just think what an unusual case it was. It was a temporary seal of unknown origin, at one in the early stages of seal creation. Everyone experiences a slight chill, and it can become fatal if left untreated. The lady, on the other hand, really had tremors and stomach aches the whole way, and that was a deathly sign. At this rate, her funeral will be in 3 days. But the Duke said that not in 3 days, but probably in a week. The girl was simply in shock that she would die, in any case, and did not know what was happening, because such a turn of events did not occur in the original story of the novel. In this case, she may die again. Her expression changed dramatically, and she didn't know what to do next. The doctor promised her that they could weaken the effect of the seal, and there was only one option. It was possible to increase the level of closeness, and since it was a life companion seal, it was only physical contact. that is, tactile contact with the Duke. In the novel, the Duke did not like it when someone touched him, and the girl was shocked when he himself took her hand. But it was not enough to just hold hands, but it was enough for a start. The girl was very nervous at that moment. For her it was amazing and unusual to get into such circumstances. Orky were much nicer than she thought. Right, their lives were in danger and it didn't matter how much he didn't like to be touched. But they had no choice. But when they met, he didn't mind taking her hand. Perhaps this is how his people show their gratitude. Then the doctor began to say that he turned to archaeology and learned that in the case of unknown beginnings it takes a year to remove them. Instead, now for a year the girl will become the Duke's only weakness. This was really stressing the girl out, and the only reason she wanted to be his savior was because she needed to sneak into his estate and she didn't have time to worry about any seals. She just needed to hurry, find the Grey Cardinal and the 3 spies. But I didn't expect such a reaction. And they should constantly be in physical contact and hold hands. It's not something special. Moreover, if something happened to her, he would die too. But the Duke would not let her die or let anything happen to her. He invited her to stay in the duchy for the rest of the year. Even the servants were not human, and surely there was no human here. But the Duke had to do it to save his life, and he had to become her protector, and no one would deny it. The only witness was the doctor, but he was ready to close his mouth, and she would definitely not feel any inconvenience. It would definitely be safer for her to stay in the duchy. Although this plan was different from the previous one, it seemed to the girl to be quite good, compared to working undercover and looking for information. But while she lives in the estate, she will do the investigation and it will be much easier for her. In addition, she has become the only weakness of the Duke, and no one in the castle, except the Duke, can touch her. It is a very good suggestion. And she was indeed very suspicious, because it might be that the Duke would turn out to be a Grey Cardinal, and it might be some kind of trap for her. Even if that is the case, and if she can find the clue to avenge her family, then she will do anything for it. After all, she agreed to stay at the estate, and now the Duke was ready to listen to her favor. She said that he had promised that he wouldn't let anything happen to her, and that promise she hoped he would hold her to the end. She was afraid that this would only go on until the seal was gone and he could kill her without anyone knowing. Even when it's all over, he won't let anything happen to her. Her heart was trembling, as it had been determined in advance that it was the effect of the seal. Then the Duke showed her the room she would live in. After her family was destroyed, she always survived on the street in a children's shelter and in squalid huts. And if nothing had happened, her family would have lived in the same house. The girl really likes this room. The Duke touched the girl's head because he thought she might have a fever, but she seemed to be fine. The girl, in turn, also decided to touch the Duke and check if everything was okay with him, and said that everything was fine, fortunately. Then the action takes place when a bird on its wings brings the brother the news that there are no letters from his sister yet. It was surprising because she would not have remained silent after learning of her brother's achievement. Maybe she still hasn't read the newspaper about how a knight who was from the common people, namely he became gifted and special. In the next chapter, the Duke told the girl to rest, but the girl said that they needed to increase their intimacy. So she thought they needed to confirm their status to get closer, and they would have dinner every day. But this will probably sound unexpected. But the overall picture looked like she would have to live closed in the estate, and it is not different from the jungle, where the stronger predators bully the weaker ones. Being under the protection of the Duke, nothing threatens her life. But she can start cleaning and not notice, and will also be ignored, but she is used to this, so there will be no conflict. Because if they start, they will greatly hinder the gathering of information about their enemies. And yes, if everyone sees her enjoying dinner with the Duke every day, they won't be able to avoid her anymore. If the Duke is one of her enemies, then she must ask to accept his proposal. She could find out some news during dinner already. It was a pretty good idea, the Duke thought, and so they were to begin their meal together that evening. Then she saw her clothes and decided to hint to the Duke, because she was wearing clothes from the medical center. Therefore, she could not come to dinner with him in this way. The Duke promised her that he would prepare another outfit for her, which she would receive tomorrow. And he added instead that she looks good in those clothes too. The girl felt pain in her stomach again, and it seems that after dinner she had some kind of indigestion in her stomach. The idea was to get the Duke's servants to stop ignoring her. But it didn't turn out the way she wanted, and she felt they were laughing at her because of her appearance. She needed a pill for not welding, and so she really wanted her luggage to be delivered at last. The girl wondered what the people in the medical center looked like, watching the Duke's servants carry her thing. The director of the center was very angry when he found out that she had already come under the Duke's supervision and had also resigned. Finally, all her luggage went through, and she decided to take it apart and saw her book inside. She put on her favorite pajamas and started reading. Everything was going according to plan so far, and she decided to see what was next. Then it is shown how the servants discussed again the news that the Duke's hair was being touched, and also said that the girl was very unpleasant, thin and small as a branch and not at all decent. However, they did not like the fact that people now live in this estate. people are creatures that cry and give up. And if they meet with some very weightless difficulty, they decided to make fun of the girl because they felt that people deserve to be treated like that, and it would be the right thing to do. But they were ordered to finally get to work, and instead of discussing some nonsense, their job was to serve the estate, not to gossip behind someone's back. The senior servant also hated humans, but they weren't worth gossiping about, and it didn't matter if you liked them or not. They were just weak creatures. She was sure that this girl in their estate just wouldn't last. The girl woke up the next morning in her room and realized that this place she still remembered. She successfully infiltrated the Duke's estate and made it there unscathed. And now it's time to start working on her brilliant plan for revenge. The girl was lying in her bed and realized that it was so soft and she didn't want to get up, because for many days she just slept on the stone floor. This bed was exactly like the one she had as a child. Cashin was always complaining that her bed was much more comfortable than his, but she remembered her brother and wondered if he was tired of that work and if everything was fine with him, if he was eating well and if he was thinking about her. She realized that she must immediately write to him and ask how he was doing, and tell him that she had managed to get into the Duke's estate. Since she was planning to break into the Duke's estate, she didn't think about contacting her brother. When he became a knight, they began to exchange letters, and the bird that carried them between her and his brother was also called Cello. Cello appeared thanks to an ancient magic used by his parents to protect them, and only people with very powerful magical power can see him, and he will find her and knock on her window. The girl was waiting for the bird, which was supposed to fly, and she needed to open the window to let it in and not miss it. But at that moment, an older servant appeared and told her not to touch the window. All the windows in the Duke's estate are endowed with enormous magical power to prevent entry from the inside. If one of the people touches them, his hand will be blown off with an explosion. The manager of Duke Rudol's estate appeared before her. She was very powerful, who was close to the Duke and ruled the entire estate. According to the information gathered during the 3 years of operation, there are 3 important powers in the treatment center after the Duke: the captain of the knight's consort, who possessed immense power, the troops of the 4 clans of the Duke's court, and finally, the female maid who ran the estate. Rudol had information about everyone who entered and left the estate. Therefore, the next step was to make friends with her, and that was it. The girl was really frightened by this woman, and she hesitated whether she would be able to make friends with her in any way. Her father and mother hid her and her brother's true identities with the help of magic, and the girl wondered if this thing could show who they really are. And it was a certain mirror that the maid was holding. She directed it to the girl's hand and some patterns appeared there, and the test was passed. It was, of course, obvious because the magic of the girl's parents was incredible. The maid was ready to introduce the girl to her room. She was really a little afraid of this woman, but she needed to somehow make friends with her at any cost. She needs to find out her race, and then everything will be much easier. But her race was not mentioned in the novel, and even at the medical center no one knew about it. Rubel explained that this manor they built and left their mark in the history of the majority in the Duke's territory, and also have some ancient martial images inside the room. And this manor was in the cold northern lands and had a very special majestic atmosphere. All this information just poured out on the girl, and she simply could not collect her thoughts from such a crazy flow of new knowledge for her about this estate and its history. The girl understood that these people, as a rule, correspond to the characteristics of their race. For example, dogs are very friendly towards people, and dolphins are very good swimmers. Instead, this woman was very delicate and careful, and it was so much so that it stressed the girl a lot. This means that members of her race can intimidate the enemy by simply standing still. The girl had many options in her mind, whether she was a tiger or a wolf or someone else. Their people corresponded to the characteristics of their race. Therefore, the girl thought that the manager of the estate would be a jaguar. Suddenly, the action is transferred when a dinner with the Duke takes place and the girl holds a piece of meat on a fork. The Duke, on the other hand, worries about the girl's condition and turns to her, but she did not answer him. He thought that maybe she didn't like the food, but it wasn't because she was just thinking about her head maid. Then the Duke asked the girl to tell more about herself. He was interested in what kind of food she likes, as well as who she is friends with. He tries to discover her true identity. The girl understood that although she had passed the check with that magical thing that establishes her identity, but during the conversation with the Duke one-on-one, he would check her again. But she already has answers for such a case. She lost her parents and wandered the streets, after which she went to an orphanage and spent her childhood there. Then a gentleman saw that she was interested in veterinary medicine and sent her to a medical institute, after which she was offered a job at a treatment center outside the duchy, and she worked there as a nurse the rest of the time. She had friends in the orphanage, but now she has lost contact with them, and the only one with whom she supports him so far may be her brother from the common people, who was recently knighted. Surprisingly, the Duke had never heard of such a person before. Not so long ago, there was even an article in the newspaper that he was a hero of the empire, and still the Duke had never heard of such a thing. Instead, she told the Duke that he wasn't her brother, but her best friend, because they both came out of the orphanage. Perhaps, in this case, she could now exchange letters with her brother quite freely and calmly. However, in the Duke's thoughts, some malice and anxiety about this boy ignited, so he decided to visit him in person one day. The girl then inquired about the Duke's friends, but he had only had one in the past, and it was really quite an awkward question for him. Then the Duke said that he would bring this friend back no matter what, and the girl wondered what that meant. And suddenly she was struck by chest pain again, and she did not understand what was happening. Her heart also hurt, and it was all a sign. The Duke held out his hand to her, hoping that she would get better, but nothing eased and it still hurt. Then he took and kissed her hand, and it was really altogether something incredible for her, and she felt a great relief. The girl did not understand how the Duke could be so calm and did not even tremble from such a thing. Maybe he was a fox. The Duke's race was not yet revealed in the novel, but he did all these things so naturally that the girl thought that, from a human point of view, this was a characteristic trait of a fox. This being was defined by its actions, and therefore it uttered such an offer from itself. But the majority of his people are born with characteristics that correspond to animals, but very rarely those that are against their animal nature. It's kind of like a defense mechanism, and even if she could see a fox in the Duke's, it couldn't be said with certainty that it was a fox. If they got much closer, one day she would know what species he was, so he told her to just wait for that day. Brutal is one of those, and she can make sure of it. After some time, the girl meets her because she enters her room and saw something unexpected for her. Brutal was 45 years old and she was the Duke's senior maid. She had a problem that she was not satisfied with the quality of work of the other servants. No matter how good they were, she was still not satisfied with anything and they did not meet her standards. Maybe even finding someone whose cleaning and tidying skills would satisfy her was really an asterisk question. When the woman thought about all this, she had a headache, and besides, it was already a chronic headache. When the woman entered the girl's room, she saw how she had perfectly cleaned her entire room and arranged all her things. Her reaction was incredible, and it was exactly what the girl expected to see. When she first saw the manifestation of animal nature in a woman, she immediately understood what race she belonged to. However, her animal essentiality does not match her character at all, and it seemed to her that perhaps she had made a mistake. But the words the Duke said were a good clue to her that most are born with characteristics that match beasts, but there are very few that go against their beast nature. Brutal was one of them. She was industrious and lazy, attentive and negligent. Cleanliness was important to her, and she really admired her impurity and acted quickly and at the same time very slowly. She was a slow sloth and gave a kind of limpness because the moss stuck to his body as he slowly crawled through the tree. In fact, it served to protect against parasites and predators and probably made her more fleshy to hide her true origin. Brutal was very interested. How could a girl clean all this to a shine? However, the girl had her own secret to success because she was very hardworking and loved cleanliness. She did it yesterday and woke up early to clean up and literally here while you licked everything to a shine to please that woman who was just crazy about cleanliness. It turns out that she was very good at cleaning and organizing things and was very good at it. In the orphanage, she was ordered if she did not clean herself well, and she thinks that the fact that she was often called a dirty beggar on the street had an effect on this. When the girl said all this, the atmosphere changed dramatically and she became sad. In general, the girl said that she liked to clean and, by the way, she saw how she cleaned, and she swore that she did not notice a speck of dust and she thought that they should get along with each other. In general, she suggested walking together in the fresh air and generally doing various things together. However, she was His Majesty's bride and she didn't have to do that, and they couldn't be friends and have that kind of relationship with each other. The girl understood that her plan had somewhat failed, and indeed they could not communicate on any free topics. But the woman was ready to tell the girl about cleaning and similar things. If she needed anything, she offered her help and left. She left, but the girl was no longer afraid. Although she had taken one step towards success and was sure that they would still be able to become friends. She was sure of this and wanted to continue cleaning herself, so she would need to ventilate the room, and she asked the house to give her permission to open the windows. The servant allowed and finally the window was opened, and His Majesty is really worried about the estate, so if she sees something strange, she ordered her to press one magic button. Now the girl was very happy, because she can communicate with her brother without worrying about anything. And finally she saw how her favorite bird, which she had not seen for so long, flew to her. She gave her letter, which she must deliver to her brother, and sent her on her way. To prepare for the war against evil, the Emperor sends the Knights of the Rose to find support. One thing, they need to collect an army of volunteer knights, and after they conduct the selection, and the personal data of the participants will be announced separately. During the delivery of this speech by the assistant, the Duke looked very carefully at something outside the window and he saw that bird. No one noticed anything, but if something terrible were to happen, protective magic would be activated in the castle. The Duke realized that it was a male bird that had flown out of the girl's room with something in its paws. This bird, which was hidden by powerful magic, so his assistant did not see it. Next, the action takes place in the night training center. Cashin told his friends that he would help fight the monsters, and they couldn't believe it. They really did not hear, and the boys were extremely surprised because they thought he was out of his mind, because in this way he might very soon die. Although he was recognized as the hero of the empire, he still couldn't do anything. Not only was he poor, but he was also an orphan, and it would just be pointless to die, and everyone would forget about him. But if he survives, then one of the aristocrats will take him into service like some kind of animal, and it will be a certain kind of care. When the boys were really not ready to risk their lives and were very unhappy with such a decision, Cashin would not accept such taunts from his fellows, but he would see to it that no family would accept them even as animals. He promised the boy that his father would disown him after learning that he had been beaten by some commoner, and no lady would look at him. He was going to break all his limbs, and maybe then he would get his wits about him. And at this moment, during their argument, the captain of the Knights of the Red Rose walks in and is displeased to see such a quarrel between them. He made a remark to the boy to lower his sword, and indeed the captain was very angry with him. Namely, he was dissatisfied with the voluntary statement about participation in the battle with monsters. And by the way, the reason is that it will be fun, and the goal is to defeat all the monsters. And it was kind of crazy, but the boy thought it was quite funny. The captain could not tolerate such jokes from his wards, and he knew the strength of each better than anyone would admit, and appreciated that he took an active part in the Civil War. But this battle is against magical beasts, which are endowed with a power completely different from human. Of course, there will be other people there, but all of them have lost loved ones to magical beasts, so to avenge them for their family, they risk their lives and join the battle. Cashin understood all this very well, and even after that he did not want to give up what he had planned. After what happened to his family, he lives full of determination and wants to go north for the same reason. A few days ago he received a letter, and some servants who worked for the count's family fled to the north. But the reason he was going to war was because of a message from his sister. She wrote to him that she was worried about him, how he was living and whether he was all right. But instead she confessed to him that she was in the Duke's estate and she managed to escape, and that is why she became his savior and will live in his estate. He seemed to be a good person, but she sent him a lot of hugs and so that he wouldn't get sick. After this letter, the brother was determined to urgently go to the north. He was very angry that his sister ended up in his estate, and he really didn't like this life-saving story. He was not sure that everything was really okay with his little sister, and to make sure of her safety and to find ways to take revenge, he needed to go there immediately. And for that he would defeat any enemy. And it was a very worthy cause indeed. He convinced the captain not to worry because he would destroy any enemy and return unscathed. But the captain wasn't worried about him because he was just happy to go to the Duke to become a monster slayer. He decided to ask about the Duke and his personality, and was told that when he appears in the middle of a battle, he is called the Devil of the Battlefield. He was also rumored to tear people apart with his bare hands, so one had to be very careful, although no one saw it. But anyone can become the same one. The rumors were, as always, exaggerated, but they were not unfounded, because the captain would not lie. The brother came to the conclusion that his sister lives in the estate with some psycho. That is why it was necessary to immediately go to the north and not waste time. The Northern Territory is effectively equivalent to a sovereign state and has a treaty of aggression with His Majesty, and even knights sent by the Emperor must obtain a pass to pass north. Even after hearing such terrible things from the captain about the Duke, the boy was still ready to go there. The Duke was indeed not like ordinary people, but he had to save his sister because he sensed something was wrong, but he didn't fully understand what was happening. He begged a lot for his sister to be okay and take care of herself. The girl lay in her room and imagined the strong smell of blood when she was in the Duke's estate, and it was exactly about the plot of the book she was reading. There were spies who destroyed her family, and also those who tried to take her and her brother's life. It was there that she saw that person, and the girl got scared and woke up. Before her, she saw the maids, who were also very frightened because something was wrong with the girl. They introduced themselves to her that they would serve her from today. They suggested their hostess pour hot tea to calm her down and bring water to wipe away the cold sweat. But she was okay because it was just some horrible dream. However, the girls coped with everything so quickly and brought that the girl really calmed down. The girl, seeing the ears of her maids, realized that they were retrievers. She was sure of their importance because of the nature of the action. But it was really more difficult with the senior maid. For example, she was still a white crow. She needed to bond with all those creatures on the estate. It was her turn to reveal her talents. Then the action takes place the next day. The girl brought the servants a small gift for waking her up from a terrible dream yesterday. It was an elixir that she had prepared herself, and it was very popular with their people, and especially with the dogs. They were just dogs, and that's why they were very happy about this new mixture for them. The elixir will completely help them and it will give them the opportunity to get closer to them. She thought so, but then Rudel came and was very unhappy that some incomprehensible drug had been given. In the treatment center, this drug showed its effectiveness and it did not add anything to them. After taking this mixture, you stop feeling any fatigue. But it was necessary to be more careful with such young creatures, and in this case the girl decided to atone for her fault and offered a certain medicine for the older maid if something hurts. She really worked very hard and maybe she had a headache or chronic fatigue or anxiety. And, of course, all this was present in the woman, and she had wonderful medicines for chronic headaches. She just wanted to please and have her accept them and give her the formula as well. If they need to drink some mixture, first its ingredients are checked by doctors in the estate's medical office. When its safety is confirmed, then it can be drunk. Then the action takes place when the servants came to the girl and apologized to her for their behavior. But, of course, she was not angry because she did not know the rules of the estate. In fact, it is difficult for most of them to get access to the medical office inside the estate. And there are already many patients, but there are few doctors, so no one properly monitored their condition. And during the war, there were a lot of wounded soldiers there who had complications, so it's difficult for them to get there with arthritis or headaches. All that was left for them was to endure. On their territory, there is a struggle for survival, and death from disease or wound is considered natural selection. Therefore, that people began to develop medicine only in recent years. From the outside, the treatment center looked pretty bad, and the situation inside is probably even worse. But this was the girl's chance, because she ended up in the Duke's estate and finally got close to his people, but still can't get to the spies who destroyed her family. Now she officially begins their search. Once she manages to find them, she pokes their faces into the hives. The situation seemed hopeless, but the creature who was involved with the spies revealed its identity in the novel. Therefore, the girl said that if they need help with treatment, then everyone can turn to her. After all, the one she needs is hiding in the treatment center. But the Duke refused the girl to be there. He was very worried about the girl's condition and believed that it would be a huge difficulty for her. Then the action takes place in the treatment center of the estate. Here is the only spy revealed in the novel. In order to get to him, she needed to find certain hooks, so she has to work in a medical center. To this end, she persuaded the Duke to allow it. She tried to convince him and even collected various useful information that she offered him to look at. In fact, she had been preparing all night just in case the Duke didn't agree. She studied all the therapy of his people and prepared certain reports, and the Duke got acquainted with them. There was only one medical center and it had a few doctors, although the number of knights in need of help was of course exceeded by 1,000. At the academy, the girl studied veterinary medicine, and in her spare time she studied herbalism. She stayed up at night and was really always finding and studying everything. Even after work, when she was tired, she continued to study. After all, a doctor with this level of qualification is very rare here in the north. She continued to make her case to the Duke, and he began to really think it was a pretty good idea. She wrote the perfect paper and still said it wasn't good enough, so it was really the perfect strategy. Since there were not enough doctors, the girl just wanted to help the knight servants as well as the Duke. In return, the Duke said that she should cure one patient in 1 hour a day. She thought that this was not enough, but the most important thing for her was to at least get to the medical center. And the girl had heard about a doctor from the center, and she really wanted to meet him. But in reality, she really wanted to destroy this scoundrel. Then the Duke invited the girl to the doctor's office, and he asked her to cure him. The girl did not understand what was the matter because she had completely different plans. Next is a shot of the elixirs arriving to check the ingredients. The doctors smelled a person and Sam was assigned to analyze this task. He assured them that they could rely on him and he would do whatever was needed. The fact that the elixir had the smell of a person, and it was from the rumored girl, it really infuriated and annoyed him. The Duke instead told the girl that he was in pain, and the girl was shocked because maybe it was all because of the seal. Therefore, she decided to touch him immediately, and he seemed to feel better. Then he demanded the girl to kiss him. But the Duke seemed relieved and the girl immediately left his office. At this time, the girl somehow realized that her heart for some reason did not feel the effect of the seal. His assistant comes to the Duke and says that they have brought the personal affairs of a group of Knights of the Red Rose to issue a pass. He noticed that it asked for permission for the Knights of the Red Rose to pass through his duchy. And it was this admission that the girl's brother asked for. The Duke recognized the boy, and it must have been the same, the only friend mentioned earlier. And of course, he was very interested in him. Later, he learned from the assistant that this boy was a conqueror of women's hearts, and therefore the Duke expected to look at him even more. Then the action takes place several days later. In the novel, the event that the girl now learned about happened later, and she believed that she would soon meet the very person she needed and wanted. She was quite nervous and knew that she needed to thank the Duke, so she thought of what she could do for him. It then shows how she came to the medical center and introduced herself to everyone there, that she would be working with them all together.